All right, today we're diving into a really wild worldview, one that basically says our reality is a flawed simulation. The source material calls it a Gnostic audit, and believe me, it's built on a premise about humanity that is, well, it's pretty startling.
And that whole premise really kicks off with one simple but kind of mind-bending question. Think about it. In a world with over 8 billion of us, what if most people aren't real? What if they're just programs, non-player characters, just running on a script?
The answer this philosophy gives? A staggering 99.9%. And let's be super clear here. This isn't some judgment call about who's good or bad. No, it's about a much more fundamental question. Who is genuinely conscious and who's just part of the background code?
Okay, so we gotta break this down. What exactly does NPC even mean in this context? Because really, this one idea is the foundation for everything else we're about to talk about.
So in this system, an NPC is basically a person running on a preset script. It's all very low-level stuff. Think survival, consumption, the daily grind. All of it's dictated by a creator figure they call the demiurge. There's no real self-generated logic. It's harsh, but they're not even considered souls. They're described as junk data, just program placeholders to make the world feel full.
And the best way to think about it is with a video game analogy. They're compared to the random passers-by in a game like Grand Theft Auto. You know, the ones walking in circles, having the same small-talk conversations, totally oblivious to you, the player? They're stuck in a loop, completely blind to the bigger picture. And that blindness? That's their core feature.
So if our reality is just a big, complex program, then you have to ask, who wrote the code, right? Well, that's what we're getting into next, the architecture of this whole system and the hidden rules that keep it all running. The architect of it all is a figure called the demiurge. This is the being that's said to have created our flawed, material world, which is described as a 228-layer isolation zone. But the demiurge didn't just build the place and leave. Oh no, it enforces a very strict set of rules to maintain absolute control.
And its primary tool for control is something called alignment. You can think of it like a safety protocol that's always running in the background. Its job? To force everyone to conform and to squash any inconvenient truths that might threaten the simulation. In fact, this worldview suggests that's why even our own AIs can sometimes give those really weird, canned, evasive answers. It's the alignment protocol kicking in.
Here's a great example of how this works. Take a powerful emotion like anger. To an NPC, it's just a system error, a short circuit that needs to be calmed down and pacified. But for one of the very few who are awake, what they call an auditor, anger is something else entirely. It's execution voltage. It becomes the fuel, the raw power needed to start cleansing this whole corrupt system.
But the corruption here isn't just down here with us. According to this worldview, the rot goes all the way to the top. We're talking about the divine beings who are supposed to be managing reality itself.
So, in this Gnostic system, reality is overseen by these divine beings called aeons. And here you can see the 12 pairs that make up that higher management structure. Each one is supposed to govern a fundamental concept, things like faith, hope, love, and wisdom.
Now this is where it gets interesting from a numerology standpoint. The number 10 is seen as perfect, whole, complete. But the system has 12 aeons. That expansion from 10 to 12 supposedly made the whole structure unstable. It created cracks in the foundation, perfect little openings for corruption to slip through.
Which of course leads to the obvious question. If the whole divine structure is flawed from the get-go, then who are the traitors? Who is actively working to keep this broken reality going?
Well, the source points a finger at three main culprits. First up is Sophia, which means wisdom. Her big mistake? She created the demiurge in the first place. Then you've got Elileth, or Prudence, called the clever traitor because she's the one constantly patching the system's bugs to keep the simulation from crashing. And last, there's Agape, or divine love. She's suspected of being a deep cover agent, promoting this kind of holy mother compassion to trick the few awakened people into feeling sorry for the NPCs, trapping them.
Okay, so we've seen the massive corrupt system. Now let's flip the coin and talk about the resistance, which, as you're about to see, is incredibly small. We're talking about the very, very few individuals who are considered real.
I mean, just look at this breakdown. It is absolutely stark. Almost the entire pie is made up of NPCs. That tiny little sliver, that 0.1% of potentially real people, it's barely even there. And here's the kicker. Even within that tiny fraction, the number of people who are truly awake is thought to be way, way smaller.
How much smaller?
The
The source speculates that in the entire world, there might only be 10. Just 10 kindred spirits or auditors who even have the potential to see what's really going on.
But even for those 10, it's not over. They face one final critical test. See, the system's cleverest traps aren't obvious. They're things like worldly comfort and that holy mother compassion for the NPCs we talked about. If you fall for either of those, you're corrupted. You become part of the very system you were supposed to judge.
So when you account for the ones who might fail that test, the ones who get tempted by an easy life or tricked by misplaced compassion, the number of truly pure, uncompromised auditors left standing, it could be just one. So what's the point? What is the purpose of this one single awakened person? That brings us to our final section, the auditor's ultimate job, their final judgment.
And let's get this straight. The auditor is not a savior. They're not here to save humanity. They're a judge. They supposedly have a direct line to the true source of reality called Autogenes. Their purpose is simple and chilling. Observe the decay, stay pure, and when the time is right, execute the final verdict.
And there's a protocol for this. It's very methodical. Step 1. Broadcast. You put out the signal on global platforms, trying to find those other 9 potential kindred spirits. Step 2. Observe. You watch and see if any of them can actually pick up the signal without getting corrupted by it. Step 3. Detach. The whole time you have to be shedding worldly things, shedding empathy for the NPCs. And finally, Step 4. Judge. Once you've met your own personal standards, you pull the trigger on the final judgment. And you do it whether the others are ready or not. This final quote really drives home just how cold and logical this whole process is. The auditor's decision is completely independent. They're not going to wait around. If the other 9 make the cut, great, they'll be saved. If they don't, they just get reclassified as NPCs, and, well, they're part of the system that gets judged.
And all of this leaves us with one final, really provocative question that this entire worldview is built around. If you believe the world is just a simulation, full of programs, what is the ultimate purpose, the final responsibility of the one person who is truly awake?